Hello. Good morning. Thank you all so much for being here this morning. I am thrilled to be here with you all in Creative Mornings Tucson, speaking on the theme Rise. My name is Erica Saunders. As it has been mentioned, I'm a clinical social worker and practicing therapist. And I'm also a native Tucsonan and have been working in the mental health field since 1996, so quite a while. And during this time, I have learned a few things about our mental health system and trauma healing that I'm really grateful to be able to share with you all today. My hope, as I'm sure it is for all of you, is to have a thriving and healthy community, both for us now and for future generations. And this largely depends on our ability to find connection both within and outside of ourselves. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement that we are on the occupied lands of the Tohono O'odham and Yaqui peoples. And it's important to know the history of our place for so many reasons, including a greater connection to the land, its people, as well as a responsibility to do better going forward. I'd also like to acknowledge my connection to this space. This building is part of City High School, where I worked as the school counselor and then wellness director for 11 years. It's also where I met my good friend Jessica Melrose, who is allowing me to use her beautiful photography today for my presentation. Thanks, Jess. This is a picture of the sunrise from Tumamoc. It's lovely, so I appreciate your willingness to use your photography. My experience at City High was one of inclusiveness and support. It was a wonderful community that I know has made a big difference in the lives of many youth in our community. So I've been on the stage before, and I've been lucky enough to talk about topics like the importance of sleep and exercise and nutrition, to name just a few. And it was during my time at City High School and in my work in child welfare previous to that I really started to learn about the harms of our mental health system and the pathologizing language that we use around mental illness and disorders. And so it really became apparent to me that this was something that was not helpful or effective in helping people on their healing journeys. When the truth is that many of us are survivors and have learned to adapt to our environment in certain ways that we needed at the time to protect ourselves. And when we're able to see ourselves as, being able to, survive and adapt instead of being broken, that path to healing is much more accessible. So a hero of mine, Gabor Mate, says, "Safety is not the absence of threat, it is the presence of connection." So what is trauma? Trauma is actually the Greek word for wound, and it is something that happens to us that robs us of a sense of safety and of control. Trauma is actually largely subjective, and so the same thing can happen to two different people, and one person might have a traumatic outcome and the other person not. So it's really our perception of the event rather than the event itself that is traumatic. Childhood is a really opportune time for trauma for a few different reasons, including that we have only so much brain development at that point, and we have what's called egocentric thinking. So we're the center of our fishbowl, and the world is all about us. We're not really able to take other perspectives, and so we really take responsibility for the things that happen to us in a way that were never ours to carry. So if our parents divorce, it must be because I'm not good enough. If I'm abused, it must be because I'm bad. And if I am just not able to find the safety in my environment within myself at that point, I'm looking outside myself largely to find that sense of safety around me. And so if I am not in a secure attachment, if my loved ones don't feel like they have my back, then I must be unworthy of love. I must be unlovable. And so these are things that can be, from that perspective, planted very early in our development. And when we don't have that agency and we're looking to find that control, we're looking for it outside ourselves. And if we're not able to, we learn to adapt. We figure out what we need to override in our own knowing, our trust of ourselves, so that we can find a sense of safety, because on an evolutionary basis, if we were not connected, we could be abandoned and we could die. And so we're looking outside of ourselves and we're having to sacrifice our trust, our knowing, and we're being told that the sky is red. To stick to the sky is blue is a huge risk, and so we agree, the sky is red. And so we lose that connection to ourselves. We don't trust ourselves, and that's just compounded over time with different experiences. And then, trauma itself really creates a separation of connection and trust in others as well. And so also, for really good reason, based on our trauma experiences, we have a separation of mind and body. And so the alarms that are going off in our mind are overwhelming enough, and in our body overwhelming enough, and together it's just too much. So we learn to push our feelings down, we learn to not pay attention to what's going on in our body, and we separate. Also, if we're having traumas that are happening to our body, we separate for really good reasons. These are protective, these are not being broken, these are adaptions. And so what we learn to do is we learn to become smaller versions of ourselves, we learn to be hypervigilant, we learn to find control around us in any way we can, sometimes obsessively, and these are depression, anxiety, OCD, and symptoms of PTSD. So what's the good news about trauma healing? Well, we do have good news. It's a good time for mental wellness. We are learning to finally adapt some perspectives and knowledge that other cultures have held for a long time. And we are making some shifts around the broken narrative. We are collectively starting to understand adaptions more and more, and we're using that in therapy with individuals to help them see that they really can make some changes, make some shifts if they want, but they're not broken. So that self-compassion is so important, because in my experience, so much of the stuckness that we feel around our experiences is the self-judgment. It's that self-critical voice. It is that belief that we are broken. And so when we're able to remove that secondary experience and learn to feel our feelings and integrate our somatic awareness, that's incredibly healing. When traumas happen to us at a certain point in time, we have that developmental, age-appropriate construction of our brain. Our traumas are wired in our nervous system. And so talk therapy is great. It's very important for processing things. But if we're not also connecting the somatic experiences of, what we're experiencing now, understanding that, what we've learned to do to adapt to our environment are important to listen to, that they served us for a period of time, it changes the whole paradigm of our healing. It's also where we learn and need to be able to rewire positive experiences. Because if we're really disconnected from our body, we're not able to really figure out where we feel our knowing, to reestablish that trust in ourselves. And so that piece is also so important for the somatic integration. I still firmly stand behind sleep, exercise, and nutrition, very important. We also have some really exciting information around neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. We have brain imaging capabilities to be able to see that our brains can actually produce new neural connections. And there's two major times in our lives where we undergo a mass neurogenesis and pruning, and that is between 18 months and 2 years when we're developing gross and fine motor skills and language, and between 14 and 17 years of age when we're going through puberty. So these are two times where just on an evolutionary basis, we're developing new neural connections, And what we're practicing is being myelinated. Those become the superhighways of our brain. And where we're not using, atrophy and die off. We do, have the ability to kind of learn new things and develop new synaptic connections in our brain in adulthood, but there's nothing that compares to these two periods of time. But it is exciting that actually we have figured out some ways to help with neurogenesis, with what we're understanding about non-ordinary states of consciousness, the power of awe, and psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies. Ketamine-assisted psychotherapy is the type of psychedelic that we're able to utilize right now because ketamine is a Schedule III drug, which means that it is legal when prescribed by a medical professional. So I am working with an agency in town called Tucson Counseling Associates, and we are practicing ketamine-assisted psychotherapy with individuals. This type of therapy is very effective for a few reasons. And it is a therapy-forward model. It really is a medicine added to the work of therapy. But what ketamine does is it quiets our default mode. And what our default mode network is it's parts of our brain that light up when we're ruminating. When we are not engaged actively in a task, our brain takes us into a place of creating the narratives about ourselves and our lives, and it often becomes kind of white noise. We don't really even realize we're doing it. And if you picture a brain, and it's covered with snow, and you take a sled, and that sled goes down the same tracks over and over and over again. Those tracks become deeply grooved into the snow. And what psychedelics do is they puff up the snow. They create more space. They quiet our default mode so we're able to go into a space of reflective relaxation and have some insights, some aha moments that we haven't really had access to before because those other, like on a neurobiological basis, those grooves are so well embedded into our minds. And so another benefit of ketamine is that it quiets our limbic system. And our limbic system is our fight and flight center. And when we try and process trauma and PTSD, really the effects of PTSD are that we relive the trauma. We're actually taken back in time when we attempt to process and move that through our body and our awareness in different ways. And so it's inherently re-traumatizing. And so if we can calm the limbic system, if somebody can, be able to go back into memories and be able to do some reframing around the responsibility that they've held, even if on a cognitive basis we know we weren't responsible for the traumas that happened to us, still wired in our body in that way. And so it's really important to be able to process those new insights, and that means sometimes having to go back into those old ones. And so to be able to do that in a way that's not re-traumatizing it's significantly changing for the therapeutic process. So using ketamine in conjunction with therapy, we're able to find that safety in our body. Sometimes for the first time ever, I have clients say, I've never felt safe in my body, or I've never felt, the ability to be able to process these emotions in this way. And so that expansive thinking of being able to break out of some of those deep grooves and that rigidity is what allows this kind of new ability to see ourselves in new ways. A greater ability to express emotion in a way that's vulnerable, feels a little bit safer. A universal kind of experience of psychedelics is a feeling of oneness, connectedness to maybe something bigger than ourselves. And it definitely also is very impactful in terms of creating a feeling of safety and connection within ourselves and with others. And we've been collecting data at Tucson Counseling Associates with our clients using pre- and post-assessments. And connectedness and compassion is really the area where people feel like they've made the biggest shifts. Being able to have self-compassion, compassion towards others. and a feeling of connectedness both within and outside of themselves. So that's really significant because that's what we've seen anecdotally, but then to be able to capture that in research has been really exciting. The neurogenesis, the ability to have those new pathways. We know that ketamine produces new neural connections between 24 and 48 hours after a treatment. And so we capitalize on that window with therapy. That's where we have individuals come in and integrate those new insights, process, what's come up and other shifts that they have, had on an internal basis that they want to bring into the external, the way that they're living their lives and functioning on a daily basis. And so we really, know that it's really important and effective to pair that therapy in that window. And just overall, this is, again, it's not a magic pill. It's kind of being sold that way sometimes in the media. And that's unfortunate because for many people, this is like the last hope. And so for it to be sold as a one and done is really a disservice because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to rewire our brains and our bodies in new ways. And so we really, spend a lot of time doing some harm reduction and re-education around that. But what we're finding in the clinical studies that are being done right now that are kind of catching up to what we're already doing is that we know that ketamine produces some rapid alleviation of symptoms in the medicine itself following treatment, that it's really the therapy over time that is how we do that rewiring and create change. So this is showing up as data points in the clinical research as well. Psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies are not for everybody. There are contraindications for some individuals, and so I want to just spend some time, focusing on what else we have available to us every day. And we're also seeing a lot of benefits in kind of the expansive quieting of the default mode, being able to come up with new insights with meditation, mindfulness. Yoga can be a non-ordinary state. We can really, expand our ability to relate with ourselves on many different levels in ways that, we practice kind of quieting the mind and allowing new insights to come forth. And so there are ways that we can do this with breath work and other types of non-ordinary states of consciousness other than psychedelic-assisted psychotherapies. Therapy is great. It's important to be able to reframe that narrative of being broken, learning to have self-compassion. We don't need a medicine to be able to change that perspective of ourselves and our survival mechanisms. And that somatic experiencing of being able to reconnect our mind and body is so important. It's so important to know how we feel good. Where do we feel good? We know when we feel bad, but what does it feel like to feel good? Awe is really an interesting thing that is starting to be researched. Finding awe around yourself, like looking at the sunset, actually releases oxytocin, which is the love and bonding chemical in our bodies. And so when we are able to intentionally look outside of ourselves for the things that we want to practice, that we want to bring into our existence, we're able to do that. We have what's called a confirmation bias. So if we're looking for things around ourselves that confirm that we're broken, confirm that there is no safety to be found, either inside or outside of ourselves, we will find those things. But if we're looking around ourselves for the things that we're thankful for the things that bring us joy, we'll find those things as well. And that is rewiring our brains. That practice is making substantial shifts for us on a regular basis. And, the connection in our community. I mean, this is amazing. I feel so grateful to be here with you all today and so connected. And we know that a lot of people are feeling very alone, very lonely, isolated, detached. And so we have a collective responsibility to be saying hello, making eye contact, gathering when we can, reaching out to people who are not in a good space. How do we continue to create those secure attachments in adulthood that, those heal attachment wounds? We can do that as adults, and we can make a big shift in terms of how, we are functioning, how others are functioning. And it really is our ability to find that sense of connection within and outside of ourselves that are going to, just help us be the thriving community that we want to be. So I think that's it. Thank you all so much. Thank you.